Okay, this is part 3 of Quotes on Schopenhauer. There's going to be a lot of sections on Quotes on Schopenhauer. He did a lot of work. Okay. He said, "It is good to be silent, to not tell others what you are doing. This makes it harder for them to block you." And I know from experience, if I'm like writing a book, I usually don't want to talk about it too much. It depends on the book, but I somehow know by not telling others, it's almost like a reminder that I haven't finished it yet and I'm motivated to finish. Whereas if I start telling everybody what the book is start to finish, it's weird, but your brain almost feels like you finished the book and you have less energy to complete it then. Schopenhauer was fluent in German, Latin, Greek, English, and he was also able to read books in French and Spanish. So he was reading books in all these different languages. He was a great scholar of the literature of his day. And he lamented the fact that Latin was going out of style and more people wanted to speak the vernacular language of their country because Latin was something that everybody, all the educated people in Europe could speak. So he said that way you have an educated reading public of intellectual aristocrats, which made it easier for good books to get known. All right. He was a bit of an Anglophile. He had gone to school in England for part of his education. He liked Shakespeare. He loved the book Tristram Shandy by Lawrence Stern, where the guy spends the first couple chapters writing about what happened before he was born. And it's a funny book. It gets a little repetitive and long-winded, but it's a clever, very clever book. Okay, he loved Goethe. Goethe is sort of like the hero to Schopenhauer and a hero to Nietzsche. Okay, and Goethe, he was a great guy, but he's not the leader you would hope he would be. We already talked about him. I did an extensive book report on that book on him about Conversations with Eckermann. Schopenhauer was a big fan of Don Quixote. He thought that was a great book. Schopenhauer had emphasized that the key to a great book, great novel, is the interiority, whereby it discusses the thoughts of the lead character and you get into their mind, so to speak, the psychology of it, the understanding of their thoughts and how one thought and conclusion leads to another. That's what's fascinating to an intelligent person versus the action scenes and all that. You don't really care about. That's for the riffraff to pay attention to that sort of thing. Schopenhauer himself was sort of very intellectually pessimistic, despite the fact he was far better off than the vast majority of people. He had money by inheritance, which he gave him all kinds of time to read and study, which is what he wanted to do. He thought that men primarily get their intellect from their mothers and their character from their fathers. And, I thought about that and I said, gee, I wish my kids were more like me, less like their mother. They'd be better off. And I realize also that the zygote gets DNA from both parents, but from the mother it gets the mitochondria, and as well as the egg's membrane, cytoplasm, okay? And upon this, when I first realized that kids are going to be a little more like their mother than their father, I was a little sad, again, because they're better off being like me than my ex-wife, their mother. But then I realized if ex-wife mama is providing 60% of the genetic material for these kids, shouldn't she really be paying 60% of their expenses? Good luck getting that one to go through. In Rome, the ancient Roman Empire, a husband could just discard the wife. Say, no, I'm done with her. I want a new, younger model. Okay? She didn't have much recourse. That's partly why the ancient population in ancient Rome, they loved Christianity because the woman got treated so much better. It was relatively unique to Christianity that marriage would be lifelong. Women were treated, Christianity puts women on a pedestal compared to other religions. The Virgin Mary, she's like Queen of Heaven. Okay, that's pretty high up there. Okay, Schopenhauer, he never married. He had one baby with a servant that died very young in infancy. He had 2 kids out of wedlock who both died in infancy, so he didn't have any children that lived. Like I said, he didn't get along with his mother, who was cheating on his father, and he was pissed off at her. His father died, like earlier. He lived most of his adult life basically alone. He would work on his books in the morning, and he would get some exercise, and he would, if he could, go to the theater in the evening, for example. Very much like Goethe. That was sort of the life of a wealthy aristocrat, was to do your intellectual work in the day, perhaps have some type of administrative duties with your community, and then in the evening go to theater and talk to the other aristocratic men. That's a lot like Athens, what the aristocratic men do. Okay, so now Schopenhauer starts talking a little bit about genius. And that's one of the reasons why I loved reading Schopenhauer was, I wanted to be a genius myself, and I had to understand geniuses and figure out if I was one or not, and what does that involve, and how does one live a life that way and get something useful to come out of it. He said a genius does not need company as much as other men do. He's actually forced into isolation. He's focused on objective thought. In a genius, knowledge, the desire for knowledge, predominates over the will. Freed from the will, the genius can see the objective truth as it is. Kind of like the idea of Caspar David Friedrich's painting, Wanderer Above the Sea Fog, whereby he can get a bird's eye view of the subject down below. Ruckenfurger's when you're looking at him from behind. And it's like when you have 6 blind men in the elephant and you see the perspectives of all 6 of the blind men, you now have, again, a bird's eye view from above where you can see the whole situation objectively. Okay, so he says, by seeing so far, the genius does not see what is near. So they appear foolish to others. Because, the average foolish person's all focused on what's the local trivial event, whereas the genius is like trying to contemplate some bigger idea in their mind. Okay? And he said you should read the great thinkers rather than just the commentaries. Read the actual great thinker to see what they thought. Okay? He says female power is largely reproductive power. He said, females are always subjective and focused on themselves, whereas a genius tries to be objective. Okay, he says that's why it's so hard for a woman to ever become a genius, okay? Because you have to be objective to figure out something that no one else in the world has figured out yet. He said, desire is infinite, fulfillment is limited. Life swings back and forth like a pendulum between suffering and boredom. So he's a little bit sort of, life is always suffering and boredom. There's also life's a lot of fun. There's a lot of pleasant things. He says the best source of happiness comes from who the man is. The idea that by doing the best he can with what he's got where he's at, the man respects himself and then he's happy. So here's a better version of the quote by Schopenhauer. A happy life is impossible. The highest a man can achieve is a heroic life. Basically, if you're a hero in the context of your own life, then you respect yourself and you like yourself, so you're happy. We seldom think of what we have, but always of what we lack. To overcome difficulties is to experience the full delight of existence. We take no delight in existence except when we are struggling for something. We need to have a goal. The more we understand our passions, the less they control us. Women have never made a single great work of painting or poetry or literature. Yeah, he had a feeling that female intellectual achievement was very far below men. He felt that they don't have enough objective thought to be capable of producing a great painting or a great work of literature or even poetry, in his opinion. He said, science gets along well with talent, but great art is only possible with genius. Yeah, Bertrand Russell later copied that quote, but Schopenhauer came up with it before him. So anybody who's just responsible and well organized can do some basic science, okay? But to make a master creative artistic work, they say you ought to have some genius. So you certainly better train at a young age. If you train at a young age, that can generate a lot of improved ability. You have good mentors. There's a whole thing, a bunch of things that go to developing greatness. And then, what's the definition of a genius? Definition of a genius, I like best, the D.K. Simonton definition. A genius is somebody who can transform a field, okay? They don't just do what others have done. A prodigy learns more faster than other people. A genius transforms the field, thinks of it in a new way, a better way. Schopenhauer on health. Life is better if we contemplate good things, interesting things, help others, enjoy good music. The goal is to realize that most things do not matter and just focus on the few things that do matter. Schopenhauer continues, health is by far the most important element in happiness. To stay healthy, one must obtain a proper amount of exercise every day. And that's pretty much the conclusion of geniuses, is that you got to exercise a lot. Thomas Jefferson, he would say, train yourself to walk very far. Try to walk a lot every day, especially outdoors. He had a wonderful place to walk, Monticello. Friedrich Nietzsche, great ideas are conceived of when walking. Beethoven loved to go for long walks. Goethe loved to go for very long walks. He says, I trained myself to walk far. And I'm telling you, that's just a characteristic thing that echoes through studying the biographies of geniuses. I wanted to be geniuses. I read lots and lots of biographies of geniuses and studied their behaviors, their habits, their lifestyles, because I wanted to be like them. He says, all ethics begin with compassion. And what I mean by that is, there's the Bible right there, that man is created in the image of God, therefore, he's part divine and part beast, and you should be nice to him. And unless you say that man is created in the image of God, then where's the moral foundation come from to be nice to guys? Because most people are weak and pathetic, and unless you have a worldview of your society that you're going to be nice to weak and pathetic people, a lot of societies don't have that. Ancient Rome, they felt no inclination. Why should they be nice to the weak and the pathetic? The weak and the pathetic, wouldn't it be better if they just died? They'd be less of a burden to society. I'm telling you, that's how these ancient cultures are. And if you think they're nice, wait till you study them. You'll be freaked out how brutal the Romans were. They'd say, go ahead, die in the streets like a dog, you dog. They wouldn't care about you at all. And the ancient Greeks, the Athenians certainly were remarkable in how brilliant they were and creative they were. But the rest of ancient Greece, it was pretty barbaric and primitive, okay? I mean, the Spartans, what did they do? They trained to fight ever since they were little, and then they just beat the crap out of their slaves who make food for them, okay? So Sparta is really not that wonderful, and Plato admired Sparta. Remember that. That's why, you'll hear people who know the Greek philosophers pretty well. And I place Aristotle up here, okay? Socrates about here, and Plato at the bottom of that. Although Plato did some good, he did do some good things too. Anyways, that's it for Schopenhauer today. And trust me, this may seem like it's starting out slow on Schopenhauer, but Schopenhauer is incredible on the development of genius and on how somebody writes a great book. And he's pretty good on a few other things, but that's where I had my biggest learning from him. So anyways, hope you found that helpful.